All right. Well, hello, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Hurst, for inviting me to give a presentation today. Romancing the Gothic is really an incredible resource. I know I look at it a lot and reference it a lot. And so I'm just really honored to add to the contributions with my research today. The presentation is called Introduction to Gay Gothic, Pioneers of Queer Desire in a Haunted Tradition. My name is Justin Tate, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more here in a second. But let's go and just jump right in with the first question, which is, what is gay Gothic? What is gay Gothic? This is not just a brain teaser, by the way. I'm genuinely curious what your definitions are for this. I will come up with one later that'll kind of explain how I got there, but I don't think it's perfect, and there could be a better one out there. So if you have a good definition for what gay Gothic is, please provide it. Or even better, if you have a gay Gothic title of a novel that you really like, it could be old, it could be new. Please put that in. I will write it down too, and we'll see if any of those show up during today's presentation. All right, and while we're mulling that over, I do want to say that this presentation is an adaptation of an article I had published in Gothic Studies from Edinburgh University Press. It's in the July 2023 issue. It's called Peter Tuesday Hughes, Forgotten Pioneer of the Gay Gothic. If you've read that already, thank you. First of all, I appreciate it. And know that it has been 3 years since that came out, and I have made some new discoveries in this space. So hopefully there'll be some new information that you'll find interesting. And if you haven't read it yet, know that this presentation is heavily abridged from what is in there. So I would recommend you maybe check this out from your local university library, check it out through interlibrary loan, and get the kind of rest of the story there. Not much for content notices, but we are going to have some discussions that involve sex and sexuality. Nothing too traumatic or anything, but if you got little ones around, this may not be the best presentation for that. So, all right, let's jump into gay Gothic, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's so hard to define. And I think a big challenge of this is going to be because Gothic literary history is very much entwined with queer history in general. And so here's some examples just to kind of showcase that. The first Gothic book, Castle of Otranto, we love it. The first book to at least call itself Gothic. Um, it is by Horace Walpole, who many scholars and biographers believe was gay, bisexual, queer, somewhere on there. So our founder of Gothic, possibly a gay writer. Vathic by William Beckford. Now, this one, we do have some more evidence that William Beckford was at least gay. He got into a little bit of a scandal when his letters to romantic letters to a boy got published and made him get kind of exiled for a bit. The novel itself, I don't recall anything particularly gay about it, but again, gay author. Matthew Lewis, biographers widely believe he was gay or bisexual. Obviously, the author of The Monk, one of the major classics. And then Charles Maturin, Melmoth the Wanderer. I actually don't know too much about Charles Maturin, so please, if there's any scholars out there who know him, let me know. But I do know that Melmoth the Wanderer has been really embraced by the queer community for its gender bending and themes that really resonate with that. So it's been kind of really captured the attention of that. And are any of these gay Gothic? I don't know. I'm open to interpretation on this. For today's definition, I'm going to say no, and I'll explain why here in a bit, but you can see why it's a little bit tricky to pin down. And here's even a few more examples. Shelley wrote a Gothic novel when he was very young called Zastrozzi. It's really actually quite a great book. A lot of gender bending in there. He, of course, was known for his bisexual affairs. Dracula, a lot of biographers feel that Bram Stoker was gay or bisexual. Same for Henry James. So just a lot of these are big landmarks, right? I mean, these are some of the biggest books in Gothic literature, and we see a lot of gay and queer writers very much potentially being involved in that. Now, if anybody, I can't see the chat, so I apologize for that, but if anybody is listing gay Gothic titles, these might have come up. Carmilla, 1872, pretty much universally read as a lesbian vampire novel these days. for good reason. It's very clear that this vampire enjoys drinking the blood of another female, and she's pretty into it as well, it seems like. Uh, but it's not exactly that clear, so it's a little veiled. Now, Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. This book is so gay that it got him into a little bit of trouble as they were trying him for gross indecency. They would cite this book and saying this is proof you're a homosexual because of this chapter or whatever. And even Wilde's like, look, I kept it vague. I don't know what you're talking about, but didn't stop him from getting years of hard labor for that. The House of the Vampire. This might be a little more obscure one. If anybody's read it, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. But often believed to be the first gay vampire novel, or at least first male gay vampire novel, if you're counting Carmilla. It's kind of interesting. It's about a psychic vampire who like steals your creativity. So it's kind of like a plagiarist vampire. I don't know. It's kind of funny. The eroticism or homoeroticism in it to me is very, very veiled. But George Sylvester Viereck, despite having a wife and kids, largely believed to be gay as well. He's got an interesting biography to look at, problematic but interesting. And this book really reads like, to me, Oscar Wilde fan fiction. It's heavily involved in that world. And Viereck was even into conspiracy theories that believed Oscar Wilde was still alive after he had died. So, a fascinating one to add to the list. But I don't consider any of these gay Gothic for me personally because of what scholars call silent homosexuality. So, this is a quote from Antonio Sana that kind of sums this up really well. During the late Victorian age, the aggressive enactment of heteronormative laws forced systematic silencing of many homosexuals. Thus, Dr. Jekyll and Dorian Gray indirectly represent the lives that many late Victorian homosexuals were forced to conduct. So basically, it's there. We kind of know it's there, but you can't really point to a sentence in the book that says, oh, these two guys are in love or these two girls are in love or whatever, um, which makes it silent. And so my definition for the gay Gothic is this: Gothic literature with a significant, non-ambiguous queer plot element, usually romance. So to me, the keyword here is non-ambiguous. I really want it to be very clear that this guy is in love with this guy or this girl is like, I want that to be on the page for me to consider it a true gay Gothic. But I do think these earlier works are certainly should be in part of the discussion as well. Naturally, this is going to lead us to the question of what was the first gay Gothic novel. Using this definition, please throw it in the chat if anybody knows. There's a good chance, I'll give a second, but there's a good chance this is the one that's going to come up. Gaywick by Vincent Virga. So this comes out in 1980, which sounds really late, right? But for over 40 years, scholars, articles, newspapers were all calling this the first gay Gothic novel. And it was, to be fair, a really big deal. First of all, it's published by Avon, which was a mainstream publisher of Gothic novels as well. So seeing it as the first of their line was intriguing. And I mean, look at this cover. We've got a domineering master of the mansion over this his young lover. We got waves crashing on the shore. I mean, it's Gothic through and through. We love it. And a big deal. Truman Capote famously read this aloud every Christmas to his friends. He was a big fan. A lot of gay men during the 80s, as the AIDS crisis and they were even dying, would clutch this book to their chest and use it as kind of a symbol that gay love could be seen as legitimate later on. So very, very important book. It did have its haters as well. A lot of the booksellers would actually cover the cover art and put like gay content beware on it. There's even a story about a guy in Texas who shoots the book through the display window because it upset him so much, it being there. This information is mostly from an interview Vincent Verga himself did with the podcast Fated Mates. So I would definitely encourage everybody to listen to that. This book has a lot of fascinating history, and I don't want to discredit it at all, but I do want to push back on the idea that it's the first gay Gothic novel, and I think I found an earlier one. But this is again, it's not just me saying this. These are some of the newsprint items calling it the first gay Gothic novel. All across at least North America here. We got New York, calling it that. Even San Francisco, which should be more familiar with some of the more obscure gay novels, but they celebrate it as the first gay Gothic. And then here in Canada, they talk about how the first printing sold out 45,000 copies, and now a second one's coming with 55,000. So big deal. But this is where I come in. So this is where I'm going to introduce myself. Um, I am a literary historian. So the best way I can explain that is when I read a book, I am more interested in what that book is engaging with from a historical perspective or from a genre perspective than I am the actual quality of it. It's great when the quality is good and it's historically significant at the same time, but it doesn't always happen. And there's been several books that were really not that great, to be honest. But it was very important to the era and understanding culture. So this has led me to a lot of books which I feel have been largely ignored by academia and scholarship and things like that. And when I was going to school for Gothic literature, these were the ones that I felt were most underrated, underexamined. The I don't know if we have a better title for this, but I've heard them called women running from houses novels, and I kind of love that. You probably all know these covers. They are iconic. Um, I put up a three kind of landmarks here for us. We've got Mistress of Melon, which really started it all in 1960. The cover was one of the first to show the woman in her nightgown and her bare feet, and she's running from the very phallic-looking castle behind her. There's usually a light on in the upper landing to signify some mysterious presence. And not only the cover art make a splash, but the premise and the content of it, the plot, was kind of a remix on Jane Eyre, but just slightly different. There's some more murder possibilities. Usually one suitor is out to kill her and the other is out to love her, but she can't figure out which. And that, although that has shown up in Gothic literature before, it was really streamlined in Mistress of Melon, and a lot of people jumped on to reimagine that and other things too. They're not all like that, but you'll see that a lot. And certainly you see it in Dark Shadows, the soap opera that ran for many years. They had a corresponding paperback tie-in series that was kind of an adaptation of the show, but also did its own thing. And the popularity of the show plus these books, I think, really added fuel to the fire of this Gothic romance kind of genre. I also included Die, Jessica Die. This is not a landmark by any means. It's an okay book, but I included it because it's part of the queen size Gothic series, which I just love. I think it's hilarious. I do collect these. I put it here as I'll put it up here. This is how they advertise the appeal of a queen size Gothic. Queen size Gothics are a new idea. They offer the very best in novels of romantic suspense by the top writers, greater in length and drama, richer in reading pleasure. Each book is guaranteed to be reading fit for a queen. Very nice. Length seemed to be a big part of this. A lot of the Gothics were very slim, like 100 pages, and these would sometimes get into the 300s. Also, they had bigger fonts, so I don't think it's any longer. Another publisher saw this and they didn't want to be outdone, so they created the king size Gothic. How fun is that? And also advertising girth here. King size Gothics are the finest novels of romantic suspense available today. Each is carefully selected to be a better value in its content, length, and style. These were all reprints, actually, so they're not even new material like the queen size Gothics were, but I guess they were kind of a curated list. Also, not really longer. I've seen several that barely hit 200 pages or not even, so I don't really quite understand what they were going with that. Those were a little more short-lived. All right, so I'm researching Gothic romances, women running from houses novels, because I feel like they're understudied. And I run across some pretty important authors during the time. One of these is John Milton Kimbrough. Just kind of a scattering of his books here. He wrote several of these. The Heiress of Wolfskill, also a queen size Gothic. Love this cover. And then this was probably his most biggest claim to fame, this Fenwick Women saga. It runs 40 books over several years. It was expected to be a TV show that never quite happened. But yeah, so this is a big deal. So while I'm looking into Kimbrough, I'm like, this is cool. And then I find out, oh, wait, he also wrote gay pornography. Isn't that fun? So here we have him as Kim Allison writing Daisies in a Chain and the Queer Letters. And I do use pornography kind of facetiously here because I don't think any of us would be really scandalized by these books today. But this is 1969 and 1970, where any story of gay characters, certainly if they're gay, happy characters living their life, is seen as taboo and pornographic. The most probably iconic example of this is the film Midnight Cowboy, which also comes out in 1969. It ended up winning an Academy Award for Best Picture, but it was slammed with an X rating, which is basically the rating you would give to a porn film. But there's no sex in it. Like there, I don't even think they kissed, to be honest. But it was rated that for a homosexual frame of reference. Is kind of why it got stuck with that. So again, I use kind of pornography varies from decade to decade, right? I also ran across Victor J. Banis, huge paperback writer of many, many genres, many, many pseudonyms. Amongst them is Lynn Benedict and his Gothic romances here. I love these covers. These are really great. He also wrote as Jan Alexander, I think a few others. Um, but he was also writing very, very important gay landmarks in the paperback market. We have The Why Not and The Man from Camp. The Why Not is really, it's a great book. It's kind of a series of vignettes of these people as they prepare to go out to the gay bar called the Why Not. So it's very simple. It's not salacious. These are porno publishers, though. These are publishers that are known for writing the scandalous books of the era, even though I don't think either of these books have any sex scenes in them, or if so, they're very, very tame. Um, and these were hugely popular. In fact, the Why Not became kind of the first test run for can there be an audience for gay paperback fiction. Up to this point, it had all been heterosexual. And then he gets in touch with the editor and he says, let's try this. They try it out. This one's a hit, as well as The Man from Camp. Man from Camp is kind of a play on The Man from Uncle. It's also kind of a James Bond reimagining. But Jackie Holmes, which is kind of the secret agent here, his goal is to protect gay people. So like if you're blackmailed or if there's a crime ring against you or something like that, they send in the secret agents and he's out to protect you. And then they have like the nemesis that's kind of the homophobes that come in. And it's campy, obviously. It's really fun. And look at this great picture. Thank you to the Victor J. Banis Foundation, by the way, for sending this to me. We have him with his poodle and looks awful lot like the cover of Man from Camp. I think we have an alter ego situation here. All right. So I've broadened my horizons a little bit. I'm still into Gothic romance, but now I'm into gay pulp, as they call it, which is the 1960s, 70s kind of so-called smut books. And then I stumble across this one, Gay Nights at Maldalong by Peter Tuesday Hughes. It's kind of a nice cover. It doesn't really tell me much about it. I don't really know what's going on there. Doesn't relate to the book that I can tell. The back cover does give us some hints that it's Gothic. We have a castle. We have a master of the Maldalong. You know, all this is kind of giving me Gothic vibes. But this is still, you know, see how it says the sale of this book is limited to adults. You're kind of expecting pure smut. I wasn't expecting pure Gothic with a little bit of spice. Like, and this is Gothic through and through. And in fact, I think his goal was to queer the canon. There's references, probably more than I can even find, but there's heavy reference allusions to Rebecca from Daphne du Maurier. We got Castle of Otranto. I think even the Mysteries of Udolpho makes an appearance. Jane Eyre is heavy in this. Dorian Gray. Even Vincent van Gogh is going to make a fun appearance in this book. So, and again, remember, this is 1969. So according to the Psychiatric Association, you were considered mentally ill if you were gay. So just being able to say like, I am normal and I can write well would have been a pretty bold statement at the time. And I think that's what he's going for. And fortunately, he has the ability to do that with some great prose. So let's take a look at some of this right away, right from page one. We're going to see him interacting with kind of the Gothic masterworks here. You probably all know this one, right? The opening lines of Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. Simple, classic. Love it. Gay Nights at Maldalong starts with Sometimes I Dream of Maldalong. Manderley, Maldalong. You know, these are clearly a play here as well. But it doesn't really just stop there too. The Iron Gate of Rebecca is showing up. I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter. And so in Peter Tuesday Hughes' novel, Sometimes I Dream of Maldalong, and once again, Again, I wander naked through the vast, dark, shadowed halls and corridors of that doomed house, and once again I enter that hot, softly lit room with its iron bed of exotic colored silks and cushions and firelight dancing tongues of flame over stone walls. So, like, even the iron is like showing up here, and also the dream motif of being kind of a more mature person looking back at a time of this gothic vulnerability is going to play into the structure of it. So he's not just kind of mimicking a first line and moving on. He's really going deep here, and we're going to see that a lot throughout. I'm going to go deep into this book, by the way. So hang on, this is a very hard book to find, so there will be spoilers, but it's also very tough to find, so I want everybody to experience it. Our main character is Brian Glendon. This adventure of his is going to begin in the year 1875, which follows the Horace Walpole tradition of setting your Gothic in the past. He likes a little antique in there. So it's 1969, but he's setting it in 1875. Brian is 23 years old. He's an orphan raised by his aunt. We love a Gothic orphan. He's also a virgin, unaware of the evils of the world. Very Gothic. He's also, this is a little different. He's prone to wet dreams. So this is where we start to see the pulp come in a little bit here. He he he's kind of struggling with this. So his wet dreams are about men, but he doesn't quite realize that he's gay yet. He just kind of thinks, oh, I'm a young man. I've got a good libido. Anything could happen. I'm not going to worry about it. But this is happening a lot. That's fun. So we're going to see more of that. Also, the dream motif of Rebecca is coming in. And then he's going to be hired as a tutor by a mysterious man. Doesn't that make us think of the Brontes? And sure enough, on page 10, he makes sure that we get the Bronte kind of reference here. So Brian tells his aunt about this mysterious guy who says, hey, we need you as a tutor. Come live with us. And he's a little like questionable, which is a reasonable reaction. But the Aunt Phila is she feels like he's 23 and kind of like an old maid at this point. She's like, you need to get on with your life. So she says, how exciting, just like that new writer. What's her name? Emily Bronte, something from one of her weird novels. And in case that he's not convinced yet, she says, oh, all overseers or managers or whatever they call themselves are always dark, evil looking men. Didn't you know that, my dear? So she's really pushing him out of the nest here. A little aloof as well. I'm sure the Bronte fans noticed that Emily Bronte were Wuthering Heights, not Jane Eyre, and a tutor would be more associated with Jane Eyre than Wuthering Heights. Also, by 1875, both Brontes were long dead, so they wouldn't be a new writer at this point. But she's not the brightest, so we can kind of forgive her for that. I don't think it was Hughes making that mistake. I think it was intentional. All right, so Brian's going to board this ship to Marblehead, Massachusetts, and while he's there, he meets a painter, Paul. Um, Paul's a little mysterious, very good looking. Obviously, he's going to have a wet dream about him that night, because that's how Brian is. And but when he wakes up the next day, Paul has vanished without a trace. So this is not good. He's sad. This is going to introduce the multiple suitors kind of trope that we see certainly in the Victoria Holt tradition, but in other novels as well, where one might be trying to kill him and one might be trying to marry him. Who knows which? And we're going to have to sleuth it out as readers as well. He has yet to meet the master of Maldalong, by the way, which is also kind of raising red flags. He was hired by this kind of help figure, and who knows what's going to happen. But he does eventually get to the mansion. And here we also see Rebecca show up again. Manderley is going to play an important role here. And I wanted to read a quote from Rebecca that describes Manderley. Nature had come into her own again, and little by little, in her stealthy, insidious way, had encroached upon the drive with long, tenacious fingers. The woods, always a menace even in the past, had triumphed in the inn, and tortured elms that straggled cheek by jowl with the beeches and had thrust themselves out of the quiet earth, along with monster shrubs and plants. The drive was a ribbon now, a thread of its former self, with gravel surface gone and choked with grass and moss. A lot of evil vegetation here, right? We've got monster shrubs, um, grass overtaking it. So this is kind of a deeper cut for him to pull from. But let's look at the description of Maldalong. On each side of the road, the forest was deep in underbrush. Tall, scraggly nightshade draped with five-fingered vines, tinged scarlet, bloodroot, and marsh marigold bloomed in the thick grasses among maples, and a flash of dusty red might have been a fox. Branches overhead blotted out the sky and filtered light. The road flattened into a pebbled driveway, which curved to the right, plunged out into a vast expanse of green lawn, and there was Mont Maldalong. So even the greenery is showing up here in both books. And it's not plagiarism, like he's not parodying it necessarily. This is kind of original content, but it's very much inspired from a deep, deep reading of these books. All right, so I'm going to continue on here. Brian is met by Darnley, who sounds an awful lot like Mrs. Danvers, also from Rebecca. And he kind of acts like her too. He's technically the family manager and kind of in a serving role, but he takes it upon himself to have as much authority as the master of the house. So here's a quote from him. Just do as the master and I tell you, and all will go smooth as cream. He's also maybe a little bit of a conspirator. So Brian apparently wears some very tight pants, and he's able to discern a bulge there. And so he makes this kind of comment about it. The master will be very satisfied with you, I'm sure. We also meet Madame Francoise, the housekeeper. She, again, in a serving role, but don't take her for that. She is master of all the rooms and a very important figure in here. And these people becomes kind of suspects as the plot gets a little bit more juicy. Still no Philippe Malong, who's the master of the mansion, or the pupil who he was hired to tutor. So that's also giving Brian some red flags. It's going to take a really long time for him to meet them. And it starts to get kind of creepy at this point. So I think probably Hughes is pulling from Rosemary's Baby at this point, where there's some drugged smoothies, I believe, or some type of drink that puts her in a trance. And so Brian is going to experience that as well. Madame Francoise is going to give him some beef tea. And he's going to drink it. The taste was salty and pungent, but very pleasant. I think that's a sexual thing, innuendo there. I'm not sure. And then he's going to fall asleep quickly, as though I'd been exhausted for a long time. So we're going to get into this kind of surreal moment, dream type sequence. The dream did not begin at once. Vague shadows, lighted by swirling streaks of red, coursed back and forth, and I seemed suspended in space, as though I floated above the bed. The sensation continued some time. But it gets a little bit creepier. A undiscernible figure creeps into the room through a passageway and starts to drag him on up these hidden corridor. I seem to move with a kind of liquid flowing rhythm upstairs and along deserted halls, writhing in shadows. We stopped before a large door. I was shoved gently inside. The figure pushes him in this room, and the room is a little bit of a dungeon here. Walls of gray stone. The ceiling rose so high I could not see it in black shadows overhead. There was an iron chandelier with fat tallow candles. The floor was covered with white goat skins. Almost covering one wall was a huge cast iron bed heaped with cushions and draped with a heavy silk cover of bright magenta. The color astonished me because it was the first in a dream which had been monotone. On the wall across from the bed was an enormous maw of fireplace with logs burning, and I'm going to cut it off there because it does start to get a little spicy. He's going to meet another figure, very attractive but masked, and they're going to have a little bit of an ethereal affair. But shortly after that, he wakes up. So he says, I woke slowly. As my eyelids flickered open, I glanced around. I rolled over in the bed, felt the pool of wet on the sheets. So, uh-oh, another wet dream. He's having them a lot. So it had been a dream. I was slightly ashamed, and I turned over on my stomach, cuddled deep within the warm sheets. I thought, the man in the silk mask, who was he? But it had only been a dream. And I don't know if this rings any bells to other people, but when I read this, I was thinking a lot about the mysteries of Udolpho, back to Anne Radcliffe. And there's a scene in there where Emily is kind of locked in a faraway tower, and she keeps seeing like furniture moving around and seeing these shadowy, manly presences. And she's like, what's going on? And finally, she kind of confronts Dorothy, which is one of the housekeepers. Dorothy kind of gaslights her a bit on this. Says she had tried these doors among the rest and had always found them fastened. It was therefore impossible, she added, that any person could have gotten admittance into the apartments, and if they could, it was very improbable they should have chose to sleep in a place so cold and forlorn. Now, we do find out that there's a secret passageway in Emily's room that is allowing these intruders into her most intimate space. And although obviously Radcliffe back in the 1700s isn't going to write with the um, eroticism that Hughes is writing many years later, but I feel like Hughes is taking this premise and allowing it for modern times. And so he also has a similar thought about these in and out interlopers. I wondered again how the order and precise scheduling of Maldalong permitted someone to enter my rooms when the door was locked, or had it been locked? I wasn't too certain now. Again, keeping the mystery element too that is in Udolpho. All right, now we're going to see a Dorian Gray moment here. So, for those familiar with Dorian Gray, you know that when he sins, his sins are transformed into a portrait of him, but he's able to stay young and beautiful. So, Brian has a similar kind of conundrum here. He says, I ran into the bath, glared at the mirror, staring at my face. It was just my face. For some curious reason, I expected it to have changed, to look different. But the dark brown eyes, without spectacles, looked back at me knowingly. Although my face might not have altered, I saw another me peering through those eyes, grown old and evil. So he's had a loss of innocence, right? Whether this dream was real or not, he is kind of a new person, and he's seeing this kind of change in his eyes. I think this might be a little psychosomatic, or maybe even internalized homophobia happening here, because other characters in the book talk about how his complexion is glowing and how he seems so bright and chipper after these dreams. So I don't know what's happening here, but he's feeling a change in his innocence. All right, so there's other mysteries, but these are kind of the main mysteries at this point. Is something supernatural afoot? So very Radcliffe as well. Is it a ghost or is it real? Who can Brian trust? We have Paul does show up eventually back from the boat, so he's meeting him again under suspicious circumstances. The master of the house has interviewed him and talked with him, and there's a little bit of sexual tension there. So he's kind of got to decide who's evil and who's not. These shadowy figures in the dreams have resemblances to both of those characters, so he can't quite figure out which one it might be. And also, what is the beef tea? What's going on with it? Who's putting stuff in it, or what does it all mean? The solution, which seems very obvious to me, but takes him a really long time to figure out, is why don't I pretend to drink the beef tea and find out what's really going on? I can pretend to be in a trance. I'll see where this goes. I'll be able to be more aware of my surroundings. It'll be great. And Paul, who is encouraging him to do this idea, is rooting for that. And so the plan is set for him to do that night, but he decides he struggles. He just struggles what to do. And he actually decides not to do it. I must do as Paul warned me, pretend to drink the drug so I would be aware of what went on around me. But if I did not drink from the cup, would I experience that voluptuousness, that passion I had known in my other dreams? So this is also him dealing with his sexuality, right? He knows he has these feelings, but it's a lot easier when you have a wet dream when you're unconscious, or under this drug to enjoy a gay encounter. If you are worried about it when you're awake, that you have to kind of accept the reality of it. So he doesn't want to give up the tea. He wants to keep having it. And so he can't go through with the plan. He drinks it anyway. Fortunately, he waited long enough to where it's not hot enough, and maybe that changed something in the ingredients or whatever. So he is a little more aware this time as he goes back through the tunnel and he's led through these dark chambers. And this time he also discovers a lot of weird stuff. It's probably too much for me to explain today, but I'll go and read this. Suddenly, in black, swirling shadows behind my eyelids, I heard a voice say, Paul, an angel's voice. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I tried to moisten my lips, couldn't swallow. I whispered, Paul, and the word drug screamed back into my brain, and I moaned, I've betrayed him. What were those furtive, slithering movements in the dark? So he's kind of run into like a satanic ritual, is how I would describe it in here. And now he's realized, oh, Paul was the one I should have trusted, and now I betrayed him by not following the directions we had. Um, In Gothic tradition, the satanic ritual is going to go awry, and the fire that is burning is going to scatter and burn the mansion down. There were loud screams and shouting. Figures around me seemed to whirl in a torrent like leaves before a wind. I heard the hoarse yell from somewhere, Maldalong is afire! Someone was carrying me with powerful arms, naked and running with rivulets of perspiration. We seemed to fly through the crumbling doorways, ringed with fire, down corridors of acrid smoke. Who is his savior? It's Paul. Good old Paul. We knew it was Paul the whole time. And now we get to the grand happy ending, which is, by the way, a rarity in gay literature, but a defining thing in the pulp. So he's escaped in the warm sunshine of Provence, the sun, a red disk, fields brilliant orange and yellow as our friend Vincent van Gogh paints them. Those past horrors seem very remote indeed. The air is heavy with the sound of droning bees and the delicious smell of the sea. We do not go anywhere, not even to Paris, although I did once make a pilgrimage to my mother's grave. We are content to swim, to enjoy one another, and to let the years past filled with love. This is years later, but he still sometimes looks back and thinks about, just like Daphne du Maurier, still thinks back to those moments of Gothic vulnerability when he was uh, drawn through these mysterious castles here. So that's just some, by the way, of again the illusions that you'll see in this thing. There's a lot more in my article. There's a lot more I guarantee you guys would notice reading it. This is one that I picked up that is a little more obscure. They have a horse in the book called Blue Boy, which is almost certainly a reference to this famous Blue Boy painting from 1770. It became kind of an iconic symbol of the queer movement. I guess basically to say we've been around forever because this guy here has got kind of a sassy pose. And I guess that's all we know about him. He's got this pose, but people kind of consider him a young gay man or kid from the 1700s. A few years later, in 1974, so after Maldalong is published, there's going to be a magazine that comes out called Blue Boy, which is kind of like a gay Playboy. And even Peter Tuesday, who wrote for that. But the first issue they print has this painting on it and they talk about why they chose it as their motto here. I think we also got to mention that the Stonewall Uprising had just happened a few months earlier. So Maldalong comes out in December of 1969. Stonewall happens June 28th, 1969. I don't know if this was as big of a deal globally, but in the United States, this was a really key moment in the gay civil rights movement. So at a gay bar in New York City, at the time it was illegal, and so every now and then the cops would come and round people up and arrest them, and then they'd eventually release them and they'd kind of go back to their life, and it was kind of this endless loop. But one day the cops show up and they're not having it. They fight back, they throw shoes and bottles, and they say, no thanks, we're not going anywhere. And this became kind of a symbol of we're not dealing with oppression anymore, we're not sickos, we're fine, leave us alone. And it really changed a lot of mindset in North America. And it's possible with the pulp productivity that Peter Tuesday Hughes is interacting with Stonewall. Like he saw this and he said, oh, I've got to write a Gothic novel. This is a Gothic time. And he wrote this because even though June to December is close, this guy could write 8 novels in a year and the publishers could pump them out too. They were kind of like magazines. They came out frequently, lightly edited, thrown out there. And so this could be one of the first interactions, even though it's not referenced to the Stonewall Uprising. But even if it's not, even if it was all written before this happened, Stonewall was in the air, right? For this to happen, this movement was in the atmosphere. So it's definitely part of that, right up against that timeline. Who is Peter Tuesday Hughes? Oh, I wish I knew. Here's a picture of a few of his other books, but we don't know really hardly anything about him. We don't know if he's alive or not. I don't know when he was born. I don't know if that's his real name. Most likely it's a pseudonym because you kind of had to write under pseudonyms if you're going to write gay smut in the 60s. But we really don't know. He wrote 32 novels, one collection of short stories over just 10 years, 1968 to 1978. And then his name disappeared, so we don't really see it anymore. So we don't know. There's a little bit more of a biography. I was able to unearth him in the Gothic Studies article, so check that out. But I do have a bit of hot new news. I found a source that I believe his name was Peter Hughes, but his middle name was not Tuesday. It started with an E, middle initial E. So if anybody knows, if you have anything, please find me. I would love to know anything about him. But he wasn't the only one. So let's take a look at some other pioneers that would be certainly relevant to gay pulp fiction as well as to Gothic fiction here. Uh, Chet Roman's The Gay Ghouls, a fun little Gothic chiller here. It's got a very Gothic premise of kind of a young 18-year-old or orphan, of course, who discovers he has a secret inheritance and he's sent there. And then when he's there, he discovers all this plots and supernatural events happening in the house. And he's got to figure out how to survive. Not a great book, but again, I'm more interested in kind of the historical aspect of it. So I think it's a lot of fun, even if it kind of disintegrates towards the end. Oh, now this one I love though, Gay Circus by Kim Allison. Now remember, Kim Allison is actually John Kimbrough, who wrote the Gothic romances as well. And then he had this one. I would absolutely consider this kind of in the Gothic realm, maybe circus Gothic, if that's a thing. It's about a 19-year-old farm boy who runs away to join the circus. He becomes a clown. And while he's at this circus, he kind of starts to fall in love with this creepy clown, very creepy clown. And then he also kind of falls in love with this groupie who follows the circus around, but murder starts to happen and he's got to figure out which one's trying to kill everybody and which one isn't. And so there's a little bit of a romance that happens. It's super, super good. 1970, by the way, so if we're thinking about Stonewall, 1960, 1970, it's interesting that all these Gothic things are kind of coming out right after Stonewall. But I think that fits with history where Gothic literature often kind of reemerges during times of great civil unrest. So I can see that. Now, when I wrote my article and I said, okay, we shouldn't say Gaywick is the first gay Gothic anymore, we should say Maldalong in 1969, I did have people reach out to me and say, well, what about Gothic Gay by Don Holliday, who is actually Victor Bannis. This is another part of that James Bond camp series. There were several books in the series. Um, I I'm not sure on this. It's a wonderful book. It's lots of fun. It is very much, in my opinion, more in the espionage kind of spy world than the Gothic world. But in this book, Jackie Holmes, who's the secret agent, actually quits his job because he falls in love with a rich baron who just bought this cursed castle. And so they're having kind of a castle warming party with lots of friends over, but the curse kind of reemerges, or so it seems, and he's got to figure out, is someone trying to kill him, or is it really a curse? So very Scooby-Doo, but actually before Scooby-Doo, because it hasn't come out yet, so maybe more Anne Radcliffe kind of a premise there. I would call it the secret agent first and Gothic maybe second, but if someone wanted to argue this is the first gay Gothic novel, I would not fight you on it. I think there's enough Gothic elements that aren't pure parody to where it kind of fits. There's a great reference to the House of Usher in there too. That kind of makes me think that. Another author I want to highlight is William J. Lambert III, who publishes as William Maltese these days. He's still around writing books. Demon Stalk is a really great kind of Gothic chiller, also 1970. I would almost compare it to The Exorcist. Like I was generally kind of unnerved and like couldn't read with the lights out kind of a thing, but it's also kind of spicy too. So it's got a little bit of everything. Those who study gay pulp, and there's not many of us, but it has been said that Valley of the Damned is the first gay werewolf novel. I can't find one earlier than 1971, so so far it still stands. It's great. There are different types in the pulp world. You have books that are basically sex on every page or every chapter, and then the ones that are basically sex to satisfy the publisher. Because again, if you're a gay person and you want to write a gay story, you're limited to the porno publishers. You're not going to find a mainstream publisher that's going to write for you. So you had to kind of decide: do you want to just give them all the smut and they're fine with that, or write enough to where they're happy, but it's also kind of a story that you really care about. And I would say Demon Stalk is probably more of that camp, and Valley of Damned is more of kind of a sex on every page, but it is still, it's good stuff. This is also William Maltese. He also wrote as Chad Stewart and many other names. This was kind of the most surprise for me, The Erection. Isn't that a great title? Isn't that fun? When I saw this, I was kind of expecting maybe construction worker smut, like something the Village People would sing about or something like that. I don't know. But it is actually this poignant kind of family drama about a father who has a gay son. And because the gay son isn't going to produce an heir, he begins pouring all of his money into building this skyscraper, despite architects saying you shouldn't do it. It's about to crumble. This is a bad idea. But he just makes it bigger and taller because this is going to be his kind of legacy, his monument, since he can't have an heir. Then it kind of decides, will the son do something about it or not? Um, to me, this is very much like The Fall of the House of Usher, which is kind of the same idea about a man whose family legacy is about to end, and there's the stress there. I actually think Edgar Allan Poe is writing about a gay experience in that as well. I have asked William if he thought about House of Usher when he was writing this book. He says probably not. Don't think so. But you never know. Sometimes these things just kind of click over time, and certainly it's a poignant read that I wasn't expecting. All right, so what are the challenges of researching gay pulp fiction? So let's say these are a lot of books pre 1980, right? At one point, for 40 plus years, people are saying 1980 is the first gay Gothic, and now like there's all of these books out there, and probably a lot more that I haven't found yet in the gay pulp space. But what are some of the challenges of that for those who want to maybe dive in? And I would say you're largely on your own with this. There have been some scholarly research in books, but there is not comprehensive by any means. So if you're just trying to find a text that's going to be the most to dissect, you're going to have to comb through a lot until you find one. They're also very difficult to access. Remember, these are published as porn, and so a lot of the readers at the time they would read it, they would enjoy it, but it's not something they would want to like have displayed on their shelf in case family came over or whatever. So they would throw it away. They were cheap books, so they could just throw it away, didn't even think about it. Um, there has been a lot of I don't know about a lot, but a lot of several universities have started to build special collections of these books. They are starting to get more accessible, but unless you live close to one, that's going to be tough to find. And their used copies are floating around for sure, but it can get kind of expensive too. I would say historical context is very crucial with these as well. Sometimes it's tough to just pick it up and kind of get with what they're interacting with because these were, again, published kind of like magazines. So they were churning them out very quickly, sometimes interacting with whatever the hot button news was at the time. And since it's been a minute, you might have to do a little bit of digging to kind of figure out what are the inside jokes and also what was kind of the norms of the time when you're reading these. There is quite a bit of textual corruption as well. One of my favorite stories is a Victor Banis book where he sent it off to the publisher and they said there wasn't enough sex, so they just wrote some for him and they put him in there. And I believe they plagiarized it from a whole other book. So there's just random, like not even the same character sex scenes in this book. That's like, where did that come from? So you just never know what's going to happen with these. Sometimes it's not the fault of the authors. It's just they had editors that were kind of doing their own thing. They needed a few more pages or whatever it was. You just never know what's going to happen. And as we've seen, the covers and titles can be deceiving, like the erection. You just never know what these are about. So you kind of got to read the story to figure it out. I don't know if this is a bad thing or not, but there's a lot of sex in these books. So if you're opposed to that, it's going to be a tough world to research. And not all of it is good sex either. You know, sometimes there's a lot of sexual trauma that they're writing about. This is, the pulp space gave writers, gay and straight and everybody in between, a chance to write almost anything that would be taboo. And so you get a lot of trauma dumping, I feel like, in these books sometimes, but you also get the happy endings too. So can you just never know? There's always a surprise. Um, but I included that kind of towards the end here. I want to include this portrait from 1801 titled "A Lady Reading the Monk" as kind of also to remind us that pornography and Gothic have been around a long time, but what we consider pornographic today, and then it changes, right? But this is apparently a lady doing a one-handed read here. She's got her hand on the monk and then another one elsewhere, having a good time. And then scholars have also commented that this was a change in the Gothic when the monk comes out. Lewis offers the reader a pornographic Gothic in which the previously ambiguous supernatural is now given in all its obnoxious presence. So that's fun. There are some books that might help you out if you are wanting to dig into this to find either Gothic or just gay fiction in general. I do apologize. I know my expertise is largely on the gay male Gothic, but this book, Queer Pulp, does do both lesbian and gay, so you'll have a little bit of that in there. But these other ones are really great too. Victor Bannis wrote a memoir about his publishing from the era, Spine and Text, Some Creases. Very valuable historical information in there. This one I just discovered. Roland Graham wrote A Pornographer's Progress. You can only get it on Kobo right now, but you can download the app to read it. Super good. I think I highlighted every single sentence because there was just so much that I found fascinating about the era from pulp as a writer perspective. And then Harvard professor Michael Bronsky wrote Pulp Friction, which is a great intro if you just want to get a good vast understanding and broad. He kind of has chapters from different books and a little analysis of why they're important, and he hits some of the major players in there. So that's a really good title. There are some websites too that will help you out. Queerhorror.com is really great. A lot of discoveries I find through there. I don't think they've updated since 1999 though, so just be aware it's a little dated, but the research is good. Somebody needs to archive it because I don't want to lose any of that information that's on there. And then you'll find a lot of my musings on these type of books on spookybookie.com, Goodreads, etc. So you can find me there. I always like to write about what I'm discovering. And that's kind of it. So I'm ready for some questions.